I knew the sound of a bridge dying before I understood they were killing mine. Work lights were burning through the trees, saws screaming, and Constance Whitmore, president of the Pine Valley Estates HOA, was standing on my family bridge with a demolition crew and a deputy who kept saying, "Sir, this is a civil matter," while they cut the only direct road to my house. 30 days earlier, they had taped a notice to my gate like a threat. But watching chunks of wood fall into Merrick Creek that night, I realized this wasn't about safety. It was about pushing me off the land my grandfather bled to pay for. My name is Silas Merrick. I live on the last strip of old property that Pine Valley didn't buy. 18 acres of housewoods, and the bridge my grandfather built in 1954, long before anyone dreamed up stone gates and HOA newsletters. Growing up, that bridge was just ours, a simple way over the water. And when the developer came in the 90s with promises and renderings, my grandfather let them use it as a favor. No forms, no drama, just goodwill, because he believed neighbors should be decent without signing it in blood. Then people like Constance arrived, the kind who treat bylaws like scripture and other people like set pieces. First came the emails about aesthetic harmony, then the notes about my paint color, my truck, my overgrown trees, all of which were not actually in their jurisdiction, and every time I politely pointed to the plat map and said, "I'm outside your HOA," she would give me that tight little smile and say, "We prefer to think of our community more broadly." The morning this turned real, it was barely sunrise cold, and I was still in an old college hoodie when she marched up my walkway in heels, 2 board members trailing behind with clipboards like they were Secret Service. She slapped a violation notice against my door, the bridge. According to their assessment, was an unauthorized, unsafe structure obstructing shared access. I had 30 days to remove or rebuild it to their standards, or face daily fines and legal remedies. I told her calmly that the bridge sat fully on Merrick land, that the county plats showed that my grandfather's deed predated Pine Valley itself. She didn't even glance down, just said, "Our council interprets it differently. This is final." That was my first mistake. Thinking reason was part of the conversation. The fines started 2 days later, bold red numbers taped to my gate facing their side emails, accusing me of ignoring safety whispers at the grocery store about the angry guy by the creek who thought he was above the rules. And yeah, it stung. You know what I mean? I'd spent years designing infrastructure for cities, not exactly the profile of a reckless idiot, but nobody wanted that part of the story. That night, with the saw's rain in the air, I came over the rise and saw men in vests cutting through boards my grandfather had nailed in with his own hands, and Constance standing off to the side like a director. No hard hat, just control. "Stop!" I shouted. And when they finally killed the saw, I told her they were trespassing on private property. She pulled out a folded paper like it was a magic spell and said the HOA had an implied easement, that they were empowered to remove unsafe access, that I was welcome to contest it in court. I called 911. The deputy showed up, took a look, and delivered the line that should be printed on every HOA sign. "Looks like a civil matter." By the time they left, there was a 10-foot gap in the middle of the bridge, wet raw wood glowing in the work lights. My truck stranded on the far side. My house one long detour away. I stood there in the dark with the creek moving under my boots and felt something in my chest flip from insult to decision. Constance thought I had no cards, and on the surface I was just one man with an old house and a broken bridge. But my grandfather had built more than that. On the north edge of my property sits a small, ugly concrete substation, the kind most people never notice. It feeds Pine Valley. Back when the development went up, the utility couldn't meet the load fast enough, so they signed a private 50-year agreement with my grandfather, paying a flat rate to move power over lines on our land. When he died, that contract came to me. One clause, page 43, was highlighted in his fading yellow marker. If the association or its agents harassed, trespassed, or damaged. Supplier property. Supplier could terminate with 90 days written notice. Yeah, that happened. The next morning, I spread every document on my kitchen table: deed survey maps, bridge photos. The contract. I called Iris Calloway my attorney, a woman whose voice can cut glass. She listened, asked 3 sharp questions, then said, "They picked the wrong easement to fake. Bring everything." Within days, Iris had filed suit for trespass, and destruction demanded they rebuild the bridge at their cost, and sent a notice of breach that laid out the power contract in plain language. They had 30 days to make it right. Fix the bridge, pay damages, apologize. Or I would file the 90-day termination, and Pine Valley would need a new power source. The first call I got from Constance was not neighborly. "You can't hold an entire community hostage," she snapped, voice shaking with anger, not fear, because she still believed she was untouchable. I told her I wasn't holding anyone hostage. I was enforcing a deal they signed before she ever rolled up to a board meeting. "You cared nothing about cutting my only direct route," I said, "so do not lecture me about essentials. You have clear terms to fix this." Her lawyer mailed in emergency paperwork for an injunction, painted me as a vindictive landowner, flipping switches on kids and ventilators. In the hearing, their guy talked in sweeping moral language. Iris talked in exhibits, slow and sharp. She walked the judge through the plats, the lack of any recorded easement, the photos of the midnight demolition, the contract clause, the timeline. The judge denied their injunction, looked over his glasses at me, and said, "You are within your rights. Use them carefully." That was the twist everyone online latched onto when the local paper ran the story. Man who powers HOA community threatens to pull plug after rogue board destroys his bridge. Half the comments called me a hero, half called me a monster. And somewhere in the middle, I sat at my table listening to voicemails from residents begging and cursing in the same breath. You know that feeling when the people who benefited from your silence only discover you exist when you stop being convenient. That. I meant every word of the notice, but I also walked down to the substation at dusk, put my hand on the humming metal, and thought about kids doing homework, old folks sleeping under CPAP machines, people who had no idea what their board had done in their name. Power is clean on paper until it runs through real lives. Pine Valley scheduled an emergency town hall. I wasn't invited. I went anyway. The clubhouse was packed, faces tight, phones out. Constance sat at the front with the board and a new lawyer trying to frame it as me abusing a technical clause. Residents started asking simple questions she couldn't spin. Did you tear down his bridge? Did you tell us he owns the substation? Did you have actual legal authority? When she dodged, the room turned, and someone pointed to me in the back like I was a plot twist. They weren't ready for. "What do you want?" a woman asked, voice shaking. I stepped forward, heart pounding in my ears. "I want you to fix what your board broke," I said, "on your dime with permits in writing, and I want acknowledgement that my land is my land. You do that, and your lights stay on. Under the exact same deal my grandfather gave you. You don't. Then I follow the contract, and you find another supplier. I didn't start this." It wasn't some big movie speech, just the truth, and when I walked out, people were already murmuring about votes, bylaws, audits. 2 weeks later, Constance resigned officially for personal reasons, unofficially because an internal review found charges on the HOA card that had nothing to do with landscaping. The new board president, a retired Army guy named Brooks, came alone to my kitchen without a lawyer, without a script. He apologized. He admitted they had relied on Constance's word, that they'd been wrong, that they didn't want a war with the man who literally kept their heat running. Then he slid a new agreement across the table. Pine Valley would pay to rebuild the bridge to proper specs, formally recognize it as my private property. Sign a recorded easement for limited access. Contribute yearly to maintenance, cover my legal costs, and issue a public apology. All the things they could have done before a single board was cut. I read it thought about that night by the creek, about the judge's warning about my grandfather's handwriting on the contract. I signed. Watching the new bridge go up was surreal crews working in daylight with permits on clipboards. The foreman nodding to me, saying, "We saw the story, sir. We're gonna do this right." They added subtle lighting. Better supports a simple metal plaque that reads, "Merrick Bridge, private property, community access by permission." And most joggers never slow down to read it. That's okay. It's not for them. It's for anyone who ever thinks goodwill is the same as weakness. I never threw the switch. I kept the termination letter ready, but I didn't have to send it because the threat of real consequences was enough to make reasonable people step up and push the bully out. And that's where this story makes some folks mad. Some say I went too far the second I mentioned power, that you never ever tie basic services to a dispute, that I should have eaten the cost, rebuilt my bridge, and felt morally superior in the dark. Others think I went soft, that I should have cut them off on day 91 just to prove that the little guy can swing back. Me, I stand somewhere in between. I wasn't interested in punishing families who just wanted their porch lights on. But I was done living in a world where someone like Constance could tear up my road hide behind a badge and some bylaws and still expect me to keep quietly feeding her kingdom. My grandfather used to say, "Power serves, it does not rule." And it took all of this for me to add my own line service without respect. Is not kindness. It's surrender. So tell me what you see when you look at this whole mess. A man pushed to the edge using the only leverage he has, or a guy playing too close to a line that should never be crossed. Drop your take in the comments. Tell me if you think I was right, wrong, or somewhere in that gray middle. And if you've ever had your own run-in with an HOA or a petty little throne like this, share it, because people need to hear how far community rules can go when nobody pushes back.